Beautiful song. They were forced to sing it because I'm starting my sermon out with, "Isn't that song, Holy Now, really beautiful?" Thanks, Chris and everybody. Great job. Everything is holy now. And not only is it a beautiful song, it's a song that could possibly be telling the story of some of your lives and how it is that you are now a Unitarian Universalist. I shared with you a few weeks ago that I was raised in the Christian tradition, and this Peter Mayer song always reminds me of how I grew up going to Sunday school, listened to the preacher read from the Bible, received Holy Communion, and then over time I began to question all of that. Not just what the preacher said or what was written in the good book, but my connection to Christianity or any religion for that matter. And I'm thinking maybe some of you or some of our guests and friends that are here this morning, because they are wanting to be a little curious about what it is that we Unitarian Universalists believe. Because from what they've heard about us, they're wondering if there's anything holy about Unitarian Universalist, better known as UUs for short. So my sermon this morning is titled Like-Hearted People, because I think that's who we UUs are struggling to become. And it's one of our greatest challenges in today's society as we are faced continually with violence and hate and continued oppressions of race and identity and gender, to name a few. Now, historically, UUs have been described more often as like-minded people. Like-minded in the sense of how one uses reason and knowledge and science in helping to determine what one might believe in. Our minds will always continue to have a role to play when it comes to most everything, but especially religion and faith. So by no means am I suggesting we are no longer like-minded people. We continue to feel pretty strong about not taking Scripture literally because we think that our minds are to be used, and when coupled with our experiences, we can read any sacred text and see if it resonates with the knowledge and the experiences of our own lives. If you remember, Jesus often spoke in parables, stories that teach spiritual truths, where often one has to figure out the real meaning because his stories implied a lot. One example being the story of the prodigal son who insisted on taking his inheritance early and then who wasted it in frivolous spending and living, but who went home to his father and begged for forgiveness. And his father welcomed him in, put a ring on his finger, and then killed the fatted calf to prepare a feast for all of his friends. There's a colleague of mine, Marilyn Sewell, who used to serve the Oregon congregation in Portland. After she heard a preacher identify his own life with the prodigal son, she said one time she heard that preacher say, "I tried the same thing when I was a young man. I got my inheritance, and I spent it all pretty fast. And when I came back home, my father damn near killed the prodigal son." As UUs, we are more likely to take Scripture from any religion as metaphor or story. Of course, the story of the prodigal son is more than a literal story. It's about forgiveness and generosity, the bounty of God's love that's beyond logic and beyond anything we expect or feel we deserve. Now, if you're a guest, you may have noticed that somebody just squirmed because I said the word God. It's okay. Some of us squirm, some of us don't. And it's not necessarily because we do or don't believe in God, but basically it's because that word doesn't always seem to communicate very well. Marilyn Sewell tells another story about how when she would use the word God, she would tell people, even her congregation, I have no idea what I'm talking about. For me, God is a word for the mystery in which we exist. It's a word for the sacredness that I sense in the earth and the universe where I live. And the singer Peter Mayer calls it holy. Theologian Paul Tillich would say, it is the ground of my being. It is reality. But even if you don't believe in God, there is an understanding among all of us as Unitarian Universalists that as human beings on the planet, we are accountable to something larger than ourselves. What we name that to which we are accountable is up to each of us to discern for ourselves. There is no one name that can describe that mystery, that reality, that holy. So our minds can run in all kinds of different directions when it comes to thinking about God. And as UUs, we're smart enough to know that what I think and what you think about God, it's a pretty good chance we're never going to agree with each other. And at some basic level, I've come to learn that it doesn't really matter to us as a religious community. What matters more to us as Unitarian Universalists is that you know you are loved. And it matters to us how you love yourself and how you love others. Our searches for truth is something we struggle to define and live throughout our entire lives. And the good news for UUs is that we can search together even while thinking differently from each other. We have a familiar saying amongst UUs, but there's an argument about who said it first, of course. And the saying is, we need not think alike to love alike. While critical thinking is held in high regard for us, and we easily understand each other to be like-minded, what has become more important in today's world out of a necessity for sustainability is critical loving, revolutionary loving, and understanding each other as like-hearted people. People who love the unlovable, embracing those who feel they've been cast aside and excluded from society, and opening our hearts to those who've been shunned from other religions or communities. Have you ever walked into a room full of people like this one and feel like you were not only welcome, but you sense a resonance with the people in the room because after talking with just a few of them, you realize that you are among like-minded people? Maybe it's your politics are in agreement or your religious beliefs are the same or whatever it would be, but you found yourself surrounded by people who think like you, and you find that it's comforting, or maybe it's comfortable. But what if you walked into a room full of people like this one, and you sensed you were not only welcome, but you felt compassion, and you witnessed empathy, and you heard a language of love and caring coming out of the mouths of the people in the room? In a short amount of time, your sense of feeling welcomed just went to a deeper place. and you realize you're surrounded by like-hearted people. You realize you're listening to the voices that you're listening to are the voices of people who know how to love. And when you find yourself among like-hearted people, your life can be changed, especially if you are one who has never experienced love in a real way. So my colleague Marilyn tells another story. Can you tell I like Marilyn's stories? This one is about her own son, who she describes as an agnostic, and whose formal training was in math and physics and law, you know, those disciplines of logic. So once they were on a long car ride together, and Marilyn took the risk of telling her son a lengthy story about how she was called into ministry. And the story included what she came to describe as a mystical experience. So when she finished her story, there was a long silence. And so she thought to herself, well, maybe he's been moved by what I've said in some way, and maybe he's trying to articulate what he felt. And then her son said, "Mom, that's the most ridiculous story I've ever heard." We all experience life differently, don't we? And we think about it in more ways than there are people in the world. My reality is that I really don't care that much about your theology, and I can say that as a minister. But especially if your theology differs from mine, I am interested and I am curious, but I'd rather learn from you whether or not you feel loved and how you love others and how you love yourself enough to live through all the stressful and demanding and challenging days. I have come to believe that is what matters most in life, how well we love ourselves, each other, and for sure the people we have no clue about or we always find ourselves in conflict with. When we love well, an opportunity to see and experience what is holy can be a powerful and transformative moment. Now, we know in many religious communities, love is what matters. But the difference for Unitarian Universalists is that our lens from which we view the world is that everyone is holy, in that we are interconnected to that which is greater than the sum of us all yet present within each of us. So for our guests and friends, here's a quick lesson about the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, which, by the way, you can find in the front of that gray hymnal. If you haven't had somebody recite them to you in the last hour, that would be the go-to place to even know what they are. The first one's easy. We all memorize this one. It's the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I believe it's linked to the last one by the way of love. The 7th principle speaks to the respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. These 2 principles lift up what we affirm about life. The first principle speaks to our common humanity, our common worth, and our common ability to screw up. We are not perfect. It's a holy principle, actually, showing us a path through life that begins with relationship and acceptance rather than a path through life that only reminds us of our separation of each other and how different we are and our denial to access that which is holy. The seventh principle calls us to see the holy very differently from the way most religious traditions see it, in that what is holy is our very connection to all living things in the universe. I have another colleague who has suggested, and actually she has a course on our seven principles, and she suggests that the first and the seventh are the two pillars that hold up the rest of the other five principles. Because these five principles, in between the two, the first and the seventh that hold it up, they're the ones that help us know how to be together in community. Because guess what? We don't always get it right, right? We understand that democracy is more than a way of governance. It's an expression of faith in the power of human beings to shape their own lives by having the freedom to search for truth, encouraging spiritual growth, promoting equity and compassion with peace, liberty, and justice for all, no matter where we find ourselves in the world and no matter what age. So when you become a Unitarian Universalist, what you're really doing, you new members today, what you're really doing, well, let me tell you what you're not doing first. What you're not doing is you're not promising to believe in God. You don't need to make that promise to us or whatever name that you associate with that. You're not promising to recite a creed to us. I mean, it's great when you can memorize these principles, but it's okay if you don't. And you're not promising to pray to a particular saint or divinity. And you're not even promising to show up in church every Sunday, though don't take me literally on that one. We like you to show up on Sunday. What you are doing when you become a Unitarian Universalist and when you begin living as a Unitarian Universalist is promising each other your mutual trust and support that whatever comes your way while you are in this religious community, we are going to help you remember that you are loved. And that how you love others and yourself really matters. Let's sing about love. Number 95, Rise in Body or Spirit.